It crashed. A sudden explosion tore through the air, breaking the silence of the desolate land. In an instant, the night sky was lit up with a bright orange glow, brighter than any fire a human could have made. The crash site was located miles away from any city, on the edge of a barren desert where no one would hear the roar of the impact. The ground shook violently, and the dust that had been settled for decades erupted into the air like a living thing. It was the kind of force that rattled bones, that made you think the earth itself was trying to swallow everything in its path. Military personnel on standby at a nearby base were the first to respond, their radio signals crackling with orders as they rushed to the scene. They knew something had happened, but they had no idea what it was. At the crash site, there was no fire. There should have been. There should have been a burning wreckage, debris scattered for miles. But there wasn't. The object that had fallen from the sky wasn't what they expected. It was unlike anything they had seen before, an eerie, metallic surface that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light of the emergency lights. Its shape defied any conventional understanding of physics. It wasn't round. It wasn't oblong. It was simply otherworldly. Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Moore arrived with his team. He wasn't sure why he was called in. This wasn't a typical mission. Normally, they handled weapons testing or tracking down potential threats, not investigating alien artifacts. But this was no ordinary situation. "Sir, we have visual confirmation," one of his officers said, eyes glued to a tablet in his hands. "It looks like nothing we've seen before." "What do you mean, nothing we've seen before?" Moore snapped, his voice tight with suspicion. "Explain it to me in simple terms." "It's like a ship." "But not. The shape, the material, it's alien, sir." Ethan turned his head toward the officer, trying to read the man's face for any sign of exaggeration. There was none. The officer wasn't prone to making wild claims, especially under the pressure of a high-stakes mission like this. But still, the idea of an alien ship was a stretch. Moore ran his fingers over his stubble and took a deep breath. "Get the science team down here. Now. We need answers, not speculations." His voice was firm, sharp. He wasn't about to waste time. If this was an alien ship, then they were dealing with something far beyond their comprehension. The team approached the wreck cautiously, weapons drawn but lowered. They didn't know what they were walking into. For all they knew, the ship could be a weapon, a trap. The first scientist to step forward was Dr. Clara Reyes, a top researcher with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. She had a reputation for being calm under pressure, for solving mysteries that most other scientists would run from. As she took her first steps toward the ship, she couldn't help but feel the weight of history on her shoulders. This could change everything, if it was what they thought it was. She knelt next to the craft's surface and examined it closely. It was smooth, with no apparent seams or hatches. It didn't look like a vessel meant to transport anything. It looked dormant. "I don't understand," Clara muttered, half to herself. "There's no sign of fuel, no engines, no propulsion system. How is this thing even airborne?" "Maybe it's not," Moore said as he crouched next to her, his sharp eyes scanning the wreck. "Maybe it didn't land. Maybe it was sent here." The wind picked up again, carrying the acrid scent of burning metal. It was the only thing that seemed real in that moment. The ship sat silently, undisturbed by the chaos around it. But as Clara reached out to touch its surface, a soft hum vibrated through her fingertips. She jerked her hand back, startled. "It's alive," she whispered. "Alive?" Moore repeated, brow furrowing. "What do you mean by alive?" "It's vibrating, like some kind of energy field," she said, standing up quickly. "It's not dead. Whatever this is, it's still functioning." Before Moore could respond, a low noise came from within the ship. It was a hum at first, barely noticeable, but then it grew louder, like a distant engine starting. The ground shook once more, as if the ship was awakening from a long slumber. Everyone froze. Dr. Reyes was the first to react. "Get back. Everyone, move," she shouted, but it was too late. A blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the craft. A burst of energy that was so intense that it knocked the soldiers and scientists off their feet. Their vision went white. There was no sound, only the sensation of pressure, the feeling of their bodies being crushed under some invisible force. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light vanished. The ground was still. The ship was still. Everything was eerily silent. "Status report." Moore shouted, pulling himself to his knees. He looked around, his heart racing. The soldiers were recovering, but their faces were pale, filled with confusion. Dr. Reyes staggered to her feet, her lab coat tattered from the impact. I don't know what just happened," she said, voice trembling. "It was like nothing I've ever experienced. Some kind of energy surge." Moore's eyes narrowed. He knew the risks of handling unknown technology, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Get the perimeter secured. No one is to approach this ship until we understand what the hell we're dealing with," Moore ordered. But as the soldiers moved to secure the area, another unexpected event occurred. From the wreckage, something emerged. Something small, crawling slowly toward the team, dragging itself from the shadows of the ship's wreckage. It was barely visible at first, but it was moving. It was alive. Clara gasped. "What is that?" The creature was humanoid in shape but something different. Its limbs were long, unnaturally thin, and its skin was a shimmering shade of silver. It seemed to be dragging a broken leg, its body hunched over as though it had been injured in the crash. Its eyes, however, were the most unsettling part. They were black, bottomless, and staring directly at Clara. It wasn't human. The soldiers raised their weapons immediately, but Moore held up a hand to stop them. He wasn't sure what he was seeing, but he didn't want to escalate things until they had more information. "Clara, can you understand it?" he asked, his voice tight. Clara shook her head. "I don't know. I don't think it's trying to hurt us. But we need to be cautious." The creature inched closer, its eyes never leaving Clara. It made no sound as it moved, but it was clear it wasn't afraid. Whatever it was intelligent. It was aware of them. And it was waiting. Then, as if responding to something unspoken, the creature raised a thin, bony arm and extended it toward Clara. In its hand, it held a small object, glowing faintly with a blue light. The object was shaped like a simple orb, but Clara knew, without fully understanding why, that this was no ordinary gift. The creature, with its haunting, unblinking eyes, held out the orb and waited. And just as Clara stepped forward, a voice crackled over the radio. "Colonel, you need to see this. Now." The radio crackled again, the voice of a frantic officer barely coming through. "Colonel, you need to see this. Now." Moore's hand instinctively reached for his communicator, his mind still racing over the implications of the strange alien creature and the orb it held out. He knew he had to make a decision fast. But what was it? What kind of choice could he make when nothing about this situation made sense? "Hold your positions," Moore barked. "Dr. Reyes, don't move. Stay with the creature." Clara glanced up at Moore, her face conflicted. The alien seemed passive, yet it was impossible to predict its intentions. But she trusted Moore's command. "Understood," she replied, her voice tight with the tension of the unknown. Moore turned on his heel and sprinted toward the nearby building where the officer had called him. His mind raced. The creature, the orb, it was too much. Too much for any of them to process. The situation was becoming more bizarre with each passing second. There was no logic, no framework to make sense of it. He couldn't afford to waste time thinking about it. The military needed answers. Answers that were probably still buried in that alien wreckage. As Moore reached the building, he could hear the echo of footsteps behind him. One of his officers was following, but he didn't look back. He pushed through the door to the small command center, where the officer who had spoken to him earlier was standing next to a monitor. "Sir, you need to see this," the officer said, gesturing to the screen in front of him. The screen displayed a map of the area, zooming in on the crash site. But what caught Moore's attention was the red dot blinking sporadically on the map, moving. It was moving fast. "Is that one of our units?" Moore asked, pointing at the blinking red dot. The officer shook his head. "No, sir. That's not one of ours. It's coming from the crash site." The map zoomed in further, revealing a secondary trail. Something was leaving the crash area. And it was moving towards civilization. Towards the nearest town. "Get me a live feed of the crash site. Now." The officer quickly typed commands into the keyboard, and another screen flickered to life. On it was the footage from a drone flying over the wreckage. The creature was gone. The orb was gone. And there was nothing left but the eerie, silent husk of the ship. "It's gone," Moore muttered. "What the hell happened?" "Sir, the energy signature is still active. It's still drawing power." "But," the officer hesitated. "There's something else. Something else out there. I think it's the creature. But there's no visual confirmation. We're losing it fast." Moore's mind raced again. The creature had gone, leaving only a trace of its presence, but it had taken the orb. The object that Clara had almost touched. What did it mean? What had it meant to give it to her? He turned to the officer. "Send a team. Track that dot. Don't lose it." The officer nodded and immediately began contacting the military unit stationed near the town. Moore's mind was elsewhere, though. The absence of the creature from the crash site didn't sit right. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, and now it was gone. Had it known something the rest of them didn't? Or was it merely the beginning of something much worse? At the crash site, Clara stood motionless, still contemplating the alien's actions. It had been so strange, so deliberate. Why had it come to them? What had it wanted from her? What was the significance of the orb? She shifted her gaze to the wreckage. The ship was still a mystery, its surface gleaming with an unearthly shine. She could almost feel it calling to her, as if the wreck itself was a message. And then, the thought hit her, maybe it wasn't just the creature she needed to worry about. Maybe the ship itself had a message, hidden in plain sight. Clara stepped closer, the soles of her boots crunching on the dust. She knelt by the edge of the ship's shattered remains, searching for any indication of purpose. The ship's surface was still humming faintly beneath her touch. A strange pattern of lights flickered on and off, just below the surface. They didn't look like any kind of control panel she had ever seen. She reached down, feeling a sharp pulse of energy under her fingertips. It wasn't just alien technology, it was something more, something far beyond anything human hands could create. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Clara felt the presence again. The weight of it. The alien, or whatever it had been, was close. And it wasn't alone. Turning quickly, Clara felt a chill run through her as she saw something moving in the distance. Shadows. Shadows that didn't belong. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the light, but no. It was a group of figures, silhouetted against the desert landscape. She stood up quickly and reached for her radio. "Moore. Moore, you need to get back here now. There's something coming." Back in the command center, Moore's voice was commanding, filled with urgency. "We've lost contact with the team at the site. Get me a direct line to the drones. Now." The officer's fingers flew across the keyboard again, but the screen remained blank. No signal. The drone's last feed had gone dark. Moore clenched his fists in frustration. Damn it. What the hell is going on? Sir, the officer said cautiously. We just got a report from the town. There's movement near the outskirts. Unidentified figures, several of them. Moore's heart skipped a beat. The figures weren't just wandering. They were moving, and they were headed straight toward the town. I need a full evacuation of that town. Get me a perimeter set up. Now. The officer's voice was trembling slightly. Sir, there's something else. The figures, the ones near the town, they're not human. At the outskirts of the town, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was tinged with an orange hue as the first figures emerged from the shadows. Clara watched from her position atop a hill, her binoculars focused on the approaching shapes. They were moving faster now, and their forms were becoming clearer. It was them. The same strange, humanoid figures. They were walking, their thin, elongated bodies casting long shadows in the setting sun. The figures moved in unison, their steps synchronized, as if they were one mind controlling many bodies. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The creatures were not just a threat, they were a force. Her mind flashed back to the creature she had encountered at the crash site. The orb, the silent energy it radiated. She had been so close to touching it. So close to understanding it. But now, as these new creatures made their way toward the town, she realized the truth. The orb had been the key. The key to unlocking something far greater than she had imagined. And now, there was no stopping it. The ground beneath Clara's feet trembled again, but this time it was different. The low, ominous rumble didn't come from any conventional source. It felt like the earth itself was reacting to something unnatural, alien. Clara's breath quickened. She steadied herself as she peered through the binoculars, her gaze fixed on the leader of the creatures, taller, darker, and with eyes that glowed like coals in the dark. There was a presence about it, something far more menacing than the others. The creatures behind it moved in perfect synchrony, each step measured, deliberate. A well-organized force. But it wasn't just the creatures that disturbed Clara, it was the sudden realization of how much they had been underestimating this whole situation. The object they had encountered, the orb, hadn't just been a curiosity. It had been a warning. And now, they were all on the brink of a full-scale invasion. Clara took a deep breath, her mind racing as she raised the radio to her mouth. Her hands shook slightly, but she pushed the fear aside. The world depended on what she did next. More, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. It's not just the creature from the crash site. There's a whole group of them. They're moving toward the town. There was a pause on the other end, and she could almost feel Moore's disbelief. What do you mean, group of them? How many are there? Clara didn't want to answer. She didn't want to say the words out loud, but there was no other choice. I don't know exactly. But it's not just a handful. I'm talking about dozens of them, maybe more. And, the leader, there's something different about it. It's not like the others. Another long pause followed, and then Moore's voice came through, more urgent this time. Stay where you are. We're sending reinforcements, and I need you to monitor their movements. Don't engage with them unless absolutely necessary. Understood? Clara nodded to herself, even though Moore couldn't see it. Understood. But Moore. I don't think we have much time. Before Moore could respond, Clara cut the connection. She stood frozen for a moment, staring at the leader of the alien procession. The leader had stopped moving, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon, as if it could sense Clara's presence. A shiver ran down her spine. For the first time, she felt small. The enormity of what was unfolding was too much for one mind to process. How had it all come to this? Clara snapped back to reality as the leader raised one hand, a single, deliberate gesture. The creatures behind it stopped immediately, and for a moment, everything was still. A strange sense of calm descended on the scene. It was eerie, unsettling. Then, without any sign of communication, the creatures turned. Slowly, deliberately, they began to march toward the town. Meanwhile, back at the command center, Moore's mind was racing. Clara's report had sent shockwaves through the command center. The idea that the crash site had contained more than just an alien visitor was terrifying, but the thought that a group was now moving toward the town was something else entirely. He couldn't afford to waste time. He didn't have the luxury of figuring out why this was happening, or how. His only job now was to stop it. The room buzzed with activity. Soldiers moved swiftly, preparing for an imminent threat. Officers spoke rapidly into headsets, coordinating movements and ensuring that the entire town was being evacuated. "Colonel," one of the officers called out, snapping Moore's attention back to the situation at hand. "We have confirmed sightings of the creatures heading toward the town. We need to move fast." Moore nodded grimly. "Get our men into position. We have to isolate them before they can reach the town center. No one is to engage unless authorized." The officer nodded and ran out of the room. Moore stood there, his hands clenched, trying to focus his thoughts. For years, the military had prepared for every possible conflict, natural disasters, terrorist threats, even potential extraterrestrial encounters. But nothing had prepared him for this. An enemy that didn't even look human, an alien intelligence capable of mobilizing its forces across unimaginable distances, and a weaponry far beyond anything they had. "We need answers," Moore muttered under his breath. Suddenly, the screen in front of him flickered to life, showing a live feed of the creatures in the town. The camera zoomed in on their synchronized movements. There was no chaos, no panic in their ranks. They moved with purpose, like soldiers on a mission. "This is impossible," Moore whispered. "How did they get here so fast?" His mind spun as he turned to the officer next to him. "Activate the drones. Track their movements. Get me a clear shot of their leader. That's our best shot." The officer quickly typed commands into the system, and within seconds, the drones began their surveillance, the cameras zooming in on the approaching creatures. Moore watched intently as the leader continued to move toward the center of town, its pace unhurried but deliberate. "This feels wrong," Moore said aloud. He rubbed his temples, trying to push the growing sense of dread from his mind. Why aren't they attacking? Why are they just marching toward the town like this? There was no answer. Only more questions. At the town outskirts, near the advancing creatures, Clara watched, her heart pounding in her chest. She had followed the creatures' movements from a distance, tracking them as they got closer to the town. The closer they got, the more she began to realize that their presence here wasn't just a random event. They were moving with a purpose. She reached for her radio again. "Moore, they're getting closer. The leader is directing them. I don't think they're just here to observe anymore. They're preparing something. Clara, you need to get out of there, now." Moore's voice crackled through the speaker, panicked. "We're on our way to intercept them. Stay put, Anne." Clara didn't hear the rest of the message. She had already turned and was sprinting toward the town. There was no time to wait for reinforcements. If the creatures were planning something, she had to be there to witness it. To stop it if she could. She couldn't let herself be paralyzed by fear. Not again. Not after everything they had learned. Her breath came in quick bursts as she raced through the streets, heading toward the center of town. The creatures were already within sight, their eerie march continuing, undisturbed. She had to find a way to make contact. To figure out what they wanted before it was too late. Back at the command center, the drones had closed in on the creatures. The images they transmitted back to the command center were clear, too clear. The leader of the group was taller than the others, its form almost humanoid but somehow, wrong. The eyes, glowing an unnatural red, seemed to pierce through the screen, staring straight at the drone as if it knew it was being watched. "Damn it," Moore muttered. "They know we're tracking them." He turned to the officers around him. "Prepare for a possible confrontation. We don't know what they're capable of, but we'll have to engage them if it comes to that." Another officer, a tactical expert, stepped forward. "Sir, we've been analyzing the energy signature from the ship. It's like nothing we've seen before. It's not just a power source, it's something more. Something alive." Moore turned sharply to the officer. "Explain." The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, the energy reading suggests that it's not just an alien ship. It's a living organism, like the ship itself is part of a larger, interconnected system. It's almost as if these creatures are part of that system." Moore's eyes narrowed. "A living organism? You're saying the ship's alive?" "That's what the readings suggest, sir. It's like a neural network." Moore felt a cold knot form in his stomach. If the ship was alive, then the creatures could be more than just an invasion force, they could be part of a much larger, much more dangerous entity. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as the creature's voice reverberated through the town square. It was not like anything she had ever heard before. It wasn't an animal growl or a mechanical hum, it was something else entirely. It was deep, almost like it was coming from the core of the earth itself, and yet it seemed to be directed at her. She stood frozen, her body instinctively drawing back, but her feet remained rooted to the ground. The creature's glowing red eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, everything else around her blurred. It was as if the entire world had shifted, and all that mattered was the creature standing before her, towering above the others. Then, without warning, it raised its hand again, and the rest of the group fell silent. Clara swallowed hard, trying to control the rapid beating of her heart. She had no idea what was happening, but she couldn't look away. It was as if the creature had some kind of hold over her, as if it were waiting for her to respond. She had to do something. She had to speak. But what? What could she say? She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't a linguist or a diplomat. She wasn't prepared for this kind of contact. Still, she didn't back away. She couldn't. The truth was, she had no choice but to stand her ground. If she didn't, they would never get the answers they needed. If she didn't, humanity might never understand what was happening. The creature's eyes softened slightly, as if it were studying her, waiting. Clara held her breath and finally spoke, her voice unsteady. "I don't understand," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" For a long moment, the creature stood motionless, its gaze unwavering. The air between them felt thick, charged. Then, just when Clara thought it might speak again, there was a sudden, sharp noise from behind her. It was a crackling sound, like static, but it grew louder, more distorted. Clara spun around quickly, her hand instinctively reaching for the radio at her side. But before she could press the button to call for help, the static turned into something else, a voice, faint but unmistakable. It sounded human. "Clara. Clara, do you copy?" It was Moore's voice. She exhaled sharply and quickly pressed the button on her radio. "Moore, I'm here. I'm okay, but I'm in the square. There's a leader. They're all here. They've stopped moving, but I don't know what they want." "Clara, listen to me," Moore's voice crackled through the static. "We've got a serious problem. The creatures, the aliens, they're not what they seem. We've been analyzing their movements, and we've picked up something I think you need to hear." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" "I don't have much time," Moore continued. "The creatures, the ones you've been tracking, they're not a random group. They're part of a larger, organized force. But it's more than that. We've been intercepting signals, encrypted communications. They're talking about something called the Great Return. And it's happening sooner than we thought. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The Great Return? What does that mean? I don't know yet, but I think it has something to do with the ship. The energy readings we're getting are off the charts. We believe it's linked to their home world, and it's not just a ship, Clara. It's an anchor. A device meant to bring them back, to restore their kind. Clara's mind reeled. The implications of Moore's words hit her like a wave. If the aliens weren't here by accident, if they were here to return to their home world. What did that mean for Earth? For humanity? Before she could respond, Moore's voice came back, more urgent now. Clara, listen closely. You need to get out of there. The creature that's leading them, the one you've been talking to, it's not just a commander. It's something more. I believe it's an emissary. It's here for a purpose, and you need to get away before it decides you're part of the plan. Clara's stomach churned. An emissary? That meant this wasn't just an invasion. This was a planned operation. But why were they letting her live? Why had they stopped moving when she spoke? Moore, I can't just leave, Clara said, her voice rising with frustration. I'm not sure if they'll even let me. And I'm the only one who's gotten this close. I need to understand what's going on. I need answers. There was a brief silence, and then Moore's voice softened. Clara, please. We need you to stay safe. If you don't get out of there soon, we might lose you. We can't afford to lose anyone else. Clara clenched her fist around the radio, her mind racing. She wanted to tell him that she would leave, that she'd obey. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Something had changed in her. She felt connected to the situation in a way she couldn't explain. She had to see this through. I'm not leaving, Clara said firmly. I'll make contact with them again. If they want something, I need to know what it is. I have to. There was a long pause on the other end of the radio. Moore's voice was barely audible when he spoke next. Clara. I can't stop you. But promise me one thing, don't do anything reckless. You have to come back. Clara nodded, even though Moore couldn't see her. I'll be careful, Moore. But I need to know what's happening. I need to understand. With that, she cut the connection and slowly lowered the radio. Her hands were clammy, but she steadied herself. The creatures were still watching, their eyes fixed on her, their movements almost mechanical. They didn't seem aggressive, yet. But Clara knew that could change in an instant. She didn't have much time. Meanwhile, in the command center, Moore slammed his fist onto the table in frustration. He had tried to reason with Clara, but he knew she was determined. And deep down, he understood why. But that didn't make it any easier to deal with. What do we have? Moore asked, turning to the team monitoring the aliens' movements. Sir, they're still moving toward the town center, one of the officers reported. But they've stopped at the perimeter. They're holding position. Moore's mind raced. The creatures had stopped moving forward. But why? Why hadn't they made their move yet? Can we get a clear shot of the leader? Moore asked, his voice tense. I need to see if there's any sign of communication. The officer at the screen tapped a few keys, and the image on the monitor zoomed in on the leader of the group. The creature stood tall, its glowing red eyes still fixed on the town. It seemed almost contemplative, as if it were waiting for something, or someone. The officer cleared his throat. Sir, there's something odd. The creature, it's not just standing still. It's communicating. Moore leaned in. What do you mean? The officer gestured to the screen, where the creature's eyes were now pulsating with a rhythmic glow. It wasn't just staring anymore. It was doing something deliberate, almost like it was sending out signals. Or receiving them. "We've detected a burst of energy," the officer continued. "It's as if the creature is syncing with something. But we don't know what." Moore's stomach dropped. This was bigger than anything they had anticipated. The aliens weren't just preparing to invade. They were preparing for something else. But what? Back in the town square, Clara took a deep breath and stepped closer to the leader. The tension in the air was suffocating, and every instinct told her to back away. But she couldn't. She had come too far. This was the moment that would determine everything. The leader raised its hand again. Clara's breath hitched as it spoke once more, but this time, the words were different. The language was still foreign, but there was something familiar about it. The cadence of its voice, its rhythm, struck a chord deep within her. And then, as if by instinct, Clara opened her mouth and spoke. "I don't understand you, but I can hear you." The leader's eyes flared brighter for a moment, then dimmed again. It was as if it recognized something in her. It was a moment of connection, a moment that shifted the balance of everything. The leader lowered its hand, and Clara stepped forward, her voice steady now. "Tell me what you want. What is it that's coming?" Clara's heart skipped a beat. The words the alien had just spoken reverberated in her mind. "The Great Return has begun." What did that mean? And more importantly, why was it speaking directly to her? The leader's glowing red eyes were fixed on her, but for the first time since the encounter began, Clara didn't feel the sense of imminent danger she'd experienced before. There was a strange calmness that washed over her, as though the creature knew something she didn't, something she desperately needed to understand. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped forward, unable to tear her gaze away from the alien's mesmerizing eyes. "What is the Great Return?" Clara asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "What are you here for?" The alien didn't respond immediately. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, as if considering her question, its piercing gaze never leaving her. Clara could feel the weight of the silence, and it sent a chill down her spine. She had no idea what she was dealing with, but she knew one thing: the fate of Earth might depend on her next move. Then, to her surprise, the alien's hand lowered. It wasn't the aggressive, threatening gesture she had come to expect. Instead, it seemed almost gentle. The creature spoke again, its voice like a low hum vibrating through the air, though this time, the words felt more deliberate. "The Great Return is the fulfillment of a prophecy long foretold. Our kind, we were exiled long ago. Our home, our civilization, was destroyed. We were scattered across the stars, lost to time. But now, after eons of searching, the time has come for us to reclaim what was taken from us." Clara's pulse quickened as the alien's words sank in. Exiled? Destroyed? Reclaiming what was lost? It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but the gravity in the alien's tone made it clear that this was real. "What do you mean, reclaim?" Clara asked, her voice growing more urgent. "Are you saying that you're planning to take Earth? Or is this about something else?" The alien's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly, before it responded. "Earth is not our primary goal, human. But it is an integral part of our plan. Your planet is a key to restoring what we have lost." Clara's mind raced. She wasn't sure if the alien was trying to manipulate her or if it was being truthful, but one thing was certain: it was playing a much larger game than she could fully comprehend. "So, you're not here to invade?" Clara pressed, her voice firm. "Then why have you brought an army with you?" The leader's eyes flashed again, but this time, the alien didn't seem angry, just resigned. "We have not come for war. Our people have suffered enough. But we are not the only ones who seek what has been lost. There are others, factions who will stop at nothing to prevent the Great Return. And they will do whatever it takes to ensure that we remain in exile. Clara's thoughts raced. Others? What did that mean? Was there another alien species out there, one that wanted to keep the aliens away from Earth? If so, why? And who was Clara in all of this? She was just one person, one human among billions. What could she possibly do to change anything? Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you speaking to me? Why am I the one who gets to know all of this? The alien seemed to consider her question for a moment before speaking again, its tone almost reflective. You have been chosen, it said simply. You're kind, you are more than you know. You have the potential to understand the forces that are at play here. The Great Return will not be accomplished without the help of those who stand outside the conflict. Those who can bridge the divide between us. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Chosen? What did that even mean? She wasn't special. She was just a member of the team trying to investigate this alien threat. There was no way she was part of some grand prophecy or cosmic plan. Or was there? Before she could ask more, the alien raised its hand once more, this time to silence her. The movement was so deliberate, so calculated, that Clara felt compelled to hold her breath. I do not have time to explain everything, the leader continued, its voice soft but urgent. The Great Return will unfold over the course of days. You will be given a choice. Stand with us, or stand against us. Either way, Earth will play a pivotal role in the outcome. Clara's mind was spinning. She was standing face to face with an alien being who had just told her that her planet was part of some ancient prophecy. The weight of the situation pressed down on her chest like a vice. But there was one thing she had to know before she could make any decision. What happens if I refuse to help you? She asked, her voice shaky but resolute. The alien's eyes glowed brighter, and its voice became more intense, almost ominous. If you refuse, the consequences will be dire, not just for your planet, but for all of humanity. The others who wish to prevent the Great Return are already watching. They will not hesitate to destroy everything in their path to stop us. Clara's heart raced. This was real. This was happening. There was no turning back now. She wasn't sure what to do. She wasn't sure what the right choice was. But she knew one thing, she couldn't let the alien's warnings go ignored. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped back from the alien leader, her mind racing with all the possibilities. She needed to think. She needed time to process everything. But she also knew she couldn't stay in the town square much longer. The situation was escalating, and more was probably already freaking out back at the command center. Thank you for telling me, Clara said, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. But I need to go now. I need to talk to my team. There's too much going on. The alien didn't respond immediately, but its gaze softened slightly, as though it understood. You will need to act quickly, human. Time is running out. With those words, Clara turned and walked away from the alien, her mind buzzing with questions and fear. The Great Return. Prophecies. An alien army. The fate of Earth. It was too much to take in all at once. But she couldn't afford to waste time. She had to report back to Moore and the rest of her team. The stakes were higher than ever, and Clara wasn't sure she could trust the alien leader. But one thing was certain, there was no turning back. Meanwhile, in the command center, Moore paced anxiously, his eyes glued to the monitors. The tension in the room was palpable. Every member of the team was on edge, waiting for any sign of what might happen next. Any word from Clara? Moore asked, his voice sharp. Not yet, sir, one of the officers responded, glancing at the radio on his desk. But we're getting some strange readings from the square. The alien energy signatures are fluctuating. Moore's brow furrowed. Fluctuating how? Intensities increasing. We're seeing bursts of high-energy activity from the alien leader. Something's going on out there, but we can't make sense of it. Moore's stomach churned. He needed answers. They all did. Just then, the radio crackled to life. Clara's voice came through, faint but clear. Moore. I'm back. I have information. Moore rushed to the radio, his hand trembling as he pressed the button. Clara, where are you? What's going on? I'm headed back to the command center now, Clara replied, her voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of fear. But I need you to listen carefully. We're dealing with something much bigger than we thought. The aliens, they're here for a reason. And it's not what we expected. Moore's eyes widened. What do you mean? The Great Return, Clara said, her voice grim. It's begun. And Earth is a key part of it. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she hurried back to the command center. The words of the alien leader echoed in her mind. The Great Return has begun. Earth is a key part of it. But what did that really mean? Was it a warning? Or was it a prelude to something much darker? The radio crackled again, and Clara's grip tightened around the device. The distorted voice from the alien had left a chilling impression on her. The others, they're already here. The other factions. Who were they? What did they want? Why had they come to Earth? The air felt dense with tension as Clara neared the command center. She knew Moore and the rest of the team would be waiting for answers. But how could she explain everything she had just learned? How could she make them understand the gravity of the situation? As she entered the building, she found Moore pacing in front of the war room screens, his face taut with worry. The rest of the team was huddled around, eyes glued to the monitors. The atmosphere was thick with urgency, and for a moment, Clara could see the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. What's going on? Moore asked as he saw her walk through the door. His voice was laced with concern. What did the alien leader say? Clara didn't waste time with pleasantries. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. It's worse than we thought. The alien leader, they're not here to invade. Not at first, at least. But they've come for something Earth holds, the key to something called the Great Return. The room fell silent. The team members exchanged glances, their faces reflecting a mix of confusion and concern. What is the Great Return? Moore asked, his voice low. Clara looked around at everyone, her eyes narrowing. She could feel the weight of their gaze on her. They were looking for answers, but Clara wasn't sure she had them. The alien leader explained that their species was once exiled from their home planet. They were scattered across the stars, looking for a way to return. The Great Return is the prophecy of their civilization's restoration. They believe Earth is a key part of that. She paused, trying to process the significance of it all. But there's more. The alien leader mentioned other factions, others who are determined to stop them from returning to their homeworld. So they're not here for Earth itself, one of the scientists said, speaking up for the first time. They just need something from the planet? Clara nodded. Yes. They're looking for something that Earth possesses, something crucial to the success of the Great Return. But they weren't clear on what it was. Moore ran a hand through his hair. That doesn't sound good. And if there are other factions trying to stop them, we're caught in the middle of a much larger conflict than we realized. Clara felt her stomach tighten. That was the last thing she wanted to hear. Earth was already facing an unknown alien threat, and now it sounded like there were even bigger forces at play. The radio crackled again, and Clara stiffened. The alien's voice, distorted but recognizable, filled the room once more. Clara. You must decide. The others have arrived. They are already on your planet. Their forces are advancing. The time to act is now. Clara's heart stopped. The others were already here? That meant the conflict was about to escalate. The Great Return was no longer a distant prophecy, it was happening right now. We don't have much time, Clara said, turning to Moore. We need to decide what to do next. Moore's face was grim. We don't know enough yet. We're still piecing together the puzzle. But if there are other factions here, if they're already on Earth, we can't afford to wait any longer. Clara's mind raced as the weight of the situation sank in. She was the one the alien leader had chosen. She was the one who held the key to understanding what was going on. But could she make the right decision? Could she trust the alien leader? Was it possible to stop the war before it even started? A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The screen on the wall flickered to life, showing a live feed from a satellite orbiting Earth. The image that appeared made Clara's blood run cold. A massive ship, something far larger and more menacing than anything she had ever seen, hung in low orbit. It was like a black moon, a harbinger of death. There were no visible markings or symbols, but the sheer size of it made it clear this was no ordinary ship. Clara had seen military vessels, but nothing like this. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's them. The other faction. Moore's face hardened. We need to act fast. If we don't figure out who's behind this, we're going to be fighting a war we didn't ask for. Clara turned back to the team. I don't know what to do. The alien leader is telling the truth about the Great Return. But they're not the only ones out there. There are other aliens who want to stop them, and they've already made it to Earth. Moore stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. Clara, you've been on the front lines of this. We trust you to help us figure out our next steps. But we need more intel. Clara nodded, her heart heavy with the burden of responsibility. She had no idea how to stop the factions from tearing Earth apart. All she knew was that time was running out, and every decision she made could tip the scales in one direction or the other. She glanced at the alien leader's message again, lingering on the words. The time to act is now. Her mind flashed back to the conversation with the alien leader. It had said something about Earth being crucial to the Great Return, but Clara still didn't know exactly what that meant. Could it be that Earth was more important than they realized? Was it possible that the Earth itself had something the aliens needed? We need to make contact with the alien leader. Clara said suddenly, her voice sharp with determination. I need to go back to them. I need more information. Moore frowned. Are you sure that's a good idea? We don't know what their true intentions are. Clara looked him in the eyes, her gaze unwavering. If we're going to stop this war, we have to understand what's at stake. The only way to do that is to talk to the alien leader again. We don't have time to waste. Moore nodded slowly, his eyes filled with uncertainty. All right. But be careful, Clara. We don't know what the alien leader is truly capable of. I will, Clara said, her voice steady. I'll be back soon. Meanwhile, above Earth. The massive black ship loomed in orbit, casting an ominous shadow over the planet below. The other faction, the ones who had come to stop the alien leader's return, were preparing for their next move. Inside the ship, alien commanders gathered in a darkened room, their voices low but urgent. We must strike now, one of the commanders said, his voice laced with impatience. The time for diplomacy is over. The human planet is too important to be left in the hands of those who seek to use it for their own ends. Another commander nodded. We have the firepower to end this conflict before it even begins. The alien leader has already made its move. We will stop them before they can complete their great return. A third commander spoke, her voice sharp. It's not just about the leader. The humans are an unpredictable variable. They may choose to side with them. We cannot allow that to happen. Earth must be ours. Back on Earth. Clara was already en route, the hum of the spacecraft beneath her sending vibrations through her body. Her mind raced as she thought of the choices ahead. When she arrived, the alien leader was waiting for her, its glowing red eyes locking with hers once again. "You have returned," the alien said, its voice deep and resonating. Clara nodded. "I need to understand more. What exactly is Earth's role in the Great Return? And why are you so determined to come back?" The alien's gaze softened slightly. "Earth is not just a planet. It is the key to unlocking our future. It contains something that we lost long ago, a source of power, a link to our past, and a chance to restore everything that was taken from us." Clara's mind reeled. Power? A link to the past? What is it? Clara asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the question. The alien hesitated. "I cannot say more, not yet. But you will understand soon. The others will not allow us to succeed. But with your help, we might still have a chance." Clara's heart pounded as she made her decision. A chance to restore everything. "I'll help you," Clara said, her voice firm. "But I need to know what to do next." The alien leader's eyes flickered with a sense of relief. "Then together, we will face what comes next. The Great Return is nearly within our grasp.